enjoyed the lunch break, and I hope you're ready for a couple of very good panel discussions which we'll bring to you this afternoon. Now, our first one is looking at the topic of mentoring for modernisation. So mentoring has been shown to deliver many benefits. I think a lot of us are aware of that, but what happens at the top of the ladder? Who mentors the leaders, and who do leaders turn to for their growth, learning and upskilling? We know that social media is full of mentors, often referred to as influencers, but are they the right people to listen to? There are also podcasts by highly respected leaders from a variety of industries, but the ideas are often found 30 to 60 minutes into that listening. And given the time constraints that public sector leaders have, is this time well spent? How can mentoring aid the development of a leader? And how does it fit in with the training and development courses that are already available? Well, it's a lot of questions. Luckily, we have a fantastic panel who are going to discuss this in much more detail. And let me introduce you to them. They are Aine Gallagher, who's the Programme Manager, NGDP Local Government Association. Now, Aine has worked in local government for the past 10 years, primarily in a London borough in roles supporting politicians and senior officers, as well as policy and public affairs. We also have James Green, who's Managing Director, Institute of Government and Public Policy. James is a former senior officer in the British Army. He's got extensive leadership and management experience as a practitioner on military operations and also in strategic roles in the UK government, European Union and NATO. We have Debbie Francis, who is the chair of the Lancashire LEP. Debbie has a business career, which includes a period as Northern Cities Executive for Arcadis UK, as Managing Director of Direct Rail Services and London North Western Route Finance, and also Commercial Director with Network Rail. Now, she's involved in several mentoring schemes, as well as still being connected to some people who have been mentors to her in the past. And last but not least, we have Kate Corkin, who's a People and Operational Management Insights Director for the National Audit Office. So welcome to all of you, our panel. Lovely to have you with us. And audience, once again, please, if you use the Ask Your Question button, the function that you see at the bottom of your screens, then you can take part as well. We'd love to include your questions and would love you to be part of this conversation. So let's start off then. James, if we may, with you, please. How can mentoring help improve an organisation's equality, diversity and inclusion?
Well, thank you, Shamila. Great question. And thanks for the invite to join today's panel session and the conference. Modernisation is, of course, quite a broad term, but I think we can all agree that an organisation that is diverse and inclusive is one that will be as effective as possible. So that's something we should all strive for. And of course, mentoring can play a role in that. And I think for me, there's probably four areas. One is just the general benefits of mentoring for an organisation. So that function that it plays in terms of encouraging personal and professional growth, helping people improve, helping people to succeed in their careers. That's going to apply across any organisation. But specifically when we're trying to build diversity and inclusivity and really promote EDI, I think mentoring's particularly relevant in terms of trying to build diversity in the leadership team. And so what we see quite often is diversity-based pairing. So two people with similar diversity, one is the mentor, and then one the mentee, and that can really help bring on more junior people and get them ready for leadership at that higher level to bring diversity to the board or to the senior leadership team. I think secondly, mentoring just to improve that cross-cultural understanding. So perhaps pairings that are not people with the same diversity, but people who are very with differences in their diversity. And so, of course, by bringing together people from different backgrounds, mentoring can build that cross-cultural understanding and break down barriers. And then when we're thinking about minorities in an organisation, mentoring provides a safe place for conversations. So perhaps, especially if the mentor is from an external organisation, we can take some time out as a mentee. We can talk to our mentor, and we can talk about some of those issues that we might be facing in terms of how our diversity is accepted or embraced or not in an organisation. So I think mentors can provide a function there. And then finally, and I'm thinking probably at the sort of higher levels of the organisation. So, for example, take myself as the leader of the Institute of Government and Public Policy. I may have set for myself or for the organisation a goal of increasing our diversity during the year. And if I'm having conversations with a mentor, they can hold me to account and say, well, you said you were going to do this. How are you progressing with that? How are you? What are you doing to try and achieve that aim? So I think mentors have a role to play in that. So that's just some opening thoughts, but definitely mentoring, and especially in the public sector and especially in the civil service, I think is really powerful for improving EDI in an organisation.
Great. Okay. Well, you certainly convinced us, James, that's for sure. Let's talk about the difference between coaching and mentoring, Debbie. And I wondered, because there is a difference, if there was a right or a wrong time to adopt one approach over the other in order to support that development.
So, hi everybody. Yeah, so there is quite a difference between mentoring and coaching, but the reality is you should always consider the idea that they are on a kind of a continuum, with mentoring at one end and coaching at the other. At the end of the day, for anybody who may not be clear, mentoring is very clearly about those conversations between two people where one person, the mentor, actually brings their experience to play and offers examples and options for people to consider in terms of how they may take a problem or an issue forward, or how they may deal with some element of their own development. Coaching, at the very other end of the spectrum, is about ensuring that the person who's being coached, the coachee, gets to the answer themselves. There often tend to be that, at more junior levels, often mentoring happens, more senior level coaching happens. But the reality is it's a little bit more complex than that, about when you would be mentored or when you would be coached. It's not quite so simple to say, well, you mentor younger people who've got less experience and you coach, more people who've got more experience. I don't think it's actually quite that clear cut. But the idea is, of course, that if you've already got quite a lot of experience, then you may feel you're facing a problem, but by somebody coaching you the right way, they can ask the right questions that really make you reflect and dig in and understand that actually you had the answer in there somewhere. You may not have quite had that confidence to pull it out or whatever, but the coachee helps you pull that out. So they don't tell you anything. They don't offer up any examples of their own experiences. They don't sway you in any way. They help you really work through every element of a problem, to consider whether you've worked through every element of the problem, and you tend to come up with your own answer. And as I say, so is there a right time to adopt it? Well, there's a little bit of what I'd said is obviously you tend to find the more experience you have, the more chance that really coaching might be the way to go. There is a reason why, from a development perspective, you're not finding those answers yourselves. And it could be even the most experienced people have confidence issues, etc. So coaching can help to bring that out. But there's still not a perfect time. So a great example of mentoring and reverse mentoring, as it's called. So reverse mentoring is generally referred to as when a younger person mentors an older person. And there are huge numbers of examples where that can be extremely helpful. Particularly when you look at technologies and innovations, yes. It can often be really helpful for a younger person to mentor the older person. So it isn't always an age thing, and I think we definitely need to move away from that. But it is very different. A mentor relationship is you literally going to somebody to ask for their advice in a matter. So as a mentee, you should be instigating that engagement. If you're being coached, that's a more formal engagement. It should be set up. Both the coach and the coachee have an obligation to bring something to the session. And it's a really different process. I still have people that I have mentored one of whom is now an extremely good friend of mine. You know, I mean, we have been on holiday together and things, but, you know, it started off as a mentor-mentee relationship. And I'm still very much connected with a number of people who've been my mentors in the past. And actually, some of those have naturally led on to, I suppose, they have moved the relationship. So sometimes if I phone to chat something through, they will almost cope without it being an official, you know, engagement. They will almost coach me into the answer because they now know me well enough to go, well, I don't need to give you something on a plate here. You do know. So it is interesting as well that your relationships with mentors and coaches can change as you go through. So there isn't a right or wrong time to adopt them. It depends on the circumstances and what problem it is you are trying to overcome. The other thing is, I suppose, urgency plays a part. If something has to be solved very quickly, coaching can take a little bit longer. If you need something a little bit more immediate where you can get some help and understand it might be the right answer, then you might take the mentor. So it's not clear cut as to when's the best time for either of those, but they are very clearly different.
Yeah, no, and that was very clear from you as well. So thank you for that. Kate, I was just wondering, when have you seen mentoring work best in your experience?
Thanks ever so much, and lovely to be here this afternoon. And I think it's really sort of Debbie was touching on, it just depends on the situation, I think. So something that was extremely helpful for me was when I was considering whether I wanted to make the move to being sort of a HR director, was having someone who was already doing that role. So, you know, really getting to understand, what does the role require? What are the challenges that you're facing? And as you say, you know, really sharing those real life examples and helping me to understand whether that was a career move that I would want to make. So I think that's sort of someone who's in the profession, if you're looking to move within the profession or a specialism, having that kind of expert advice from a mentor who's doing that role in a senior role already is really helpful. And then the other side of things is actually having someone who has a completely different view. And that's where I think sort of going outside of whether it's your little area of the organisation or to a completely different organisation. And that's what I've done, is I've gone to mentors who are not within the civil service, not within the NAO, out in either the private or wider public sector, and getting a really different view on things, and actually, you know, sharing best practice and sharing ideas on how you can improve for the future. So that's worked really well. And the other one I touch on is what Debbie touched on, is the reverse mentoring has worked really well for me, for really understanding people's lived experiences. So yeah, definitely go for that one too.
Okay, great. Anya, I want to bring you in, but I was hoping you would tell us a little bit about the NGDP and what it actually is, because I guess there's quite a few of us probably listening thinking, not sure. So tell us all.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me this afternoon. Yes, delighted to tell you about the NGDP, which is the National Graduate Development Programme for Local Government. So it's the Local Government Association's flagship graduate scheme, which places high calibre graduates in councils all over the country. So we recruit graduates, and they do a 2-year programme where they work within councils and they do placements in different service areas. So they learn the skills and the kind of experience from lots of different projects. They get to work on different areas and kind of have that exposure to different services across local government. And that really equips them to move into management roles. They also do a learning and development programme alongside their employment, including an ILM level 7 qualification. And so it's really about building a pipeline of future talent for local government and really finding and developing the future leaders of the sector. So a really brilliant programme for councils to be involved in, if I can pitch it that way. And mentoring is a really important part of the NGDP. So all of our graduates on the programme have a mentor within their organisation. So that's usually someone senior, a director or assistant director or head of service within their council. And graduates find that really valuable. For many of them, it's their first experience kind of in the workplace. So having that senior person that they can learn from, get advice and support is really, really helpful. So it's a really important part of their kind of development and something that graduates on the programme really value. And then alongside our mentoring program, we also have a number of graduate-led networks within the NGDP, and one of the most established of those is our BAME network, and they also run their own mentoring program as well for BAME graduates on the program. So they match graduates up with alumni and mentors, both kind of within councils, but also more widely as well. So like was touched on already, for some people that might mean their mentor might be from either a different council or even a completely different organisation, which I think can be really valuable to bring that different perspective. And so it's something that we encourage all graduates on the programme to really take that opportunity and make the most of. And we have kind of advice and guidance for both mentors and mentees, but we encourage them to kind of have that relationship throughout their 2 years on the programme. And we find that, you know, we get really good positive feedback on that, and it really helps graduates to make the most of their time on the programme.
It certainly sounds great, and I'm sure it works in practice. I was just wondering about the time constraints, though, because we're all pushed, aren't we, in our everyday lives, in our jobs. Time seems to be one of the biggest enemies, and I just wondered about how easy it was to get mentors in place to actually do that mentoring.
I think it can be a challenge, but I think being really clear about the benefits of mentoring for the mentors as well as the mentees can really help with that. I think it's, you know, mentors themselves get a huge amount out of the relationship. It can be an opportunity to kind of have that cross division working, to learn about different experiences, and in a way kind of that reverse mentoring and learning from others, kind of lived experience can be really beneficial as well. And it's also just generally good for the organization. It really helps with the development of staff. So I think there's lots of benefits that you know, kind of help to make that a worthwhile thing for people to sign up to. But I think time constraint can be a struggle, and I think the key thing really is to have really clear expectations from the beginning and to have those kind of agreed and set out, so both the mentor and the mentee are clear about what they're committing to. So we recommend that graduates meet with their mentors once a month, and that mentors kind of make that ongoing commitment across the 2 years. And I think if everyone's clear about that from the beginning and they can make sure that they carve out that time, I think that really helps to build the relationship.
Yeah, it is definitely compromise as well, isn't it? And give and take. And as you say, being committed. Debbie, if you had an hour a week, what would you do with it?
If I had an hour a week, well, I have more than an hour a week, and we all have 168 hours, don't you know, in our week. So actually, we do have plenty of time. But in terms of what I would do with it, it is similar to what I already do. So I have a series of news forums that I'm connected to that send out sort of the daily newsletters, and that's everything from McKinsey Group through to kind of the Times daily briefing, etc. So I don't read every single thing that comes out in those, but I have them in, and I tend to collect them in, and I scan through them, literally looking at headlines. There's another one, you know, what boards need to know on a Monday morning, things like this. I will scan through those, pick up what I need from that information, look at anything I need in a bit more detail. I also have one of these subscriptions, one of these cheat subscriptions to one of these short form websites that actually provides a summarized version of all of the latest leadership thinking and business thinking that there is there. So if there's been a latest, you know, book with a new idea about how you approach management or talent management or whatever the topic is that's interesting, I will tend to fire into that, have a look at that summary of the book, and then decide, am I going to get that, or do I feel I've got enough from the summary? Some of those summaries are quite extensive in themselves, actually. And because there is so much published, it's like, how do you pick up on the latest thought leadership and decide? So you have to find techniques, because I don't think it's acceptable to ignore it all. So you have to find techniques to do it. But as we've said, everybody's very, very busy. And, you know, if you want to mentor people, it's no good if you're getting behind the curve on the latest leadership thinking and this sort of thing. So you do have to figure out your techniques for doing it. To be fair, I'd say, you know, at certain levels, it gets really hard to fit that into an hour. But we've also got to remember, it's not always like work. Some of it's genuinely interesting. You know, if you're in business and you're interested, it's interesting, you know. So I think it's finding those best newsletters for updates, finding those forums where you can scan easily, you can find the stuff that you engage with and do your development from that perspective. And also think about, forward plan. And if you really can see something coming up where you might want to discuss, because this is the other thing, relationships, Aine talked about it, you've got to be able to make the time. So a lot of the time it's no good just phoning up and hoping someone's going to be available. So you've got to also give yourself a breathing space to look ahead and go, do I think I'm going to need some help on something? Do I need to consider something? And try and get something in the diary at that point so that, your mentor or your coach or whoever it is you're going to ask for help can put it in. And that's still timely for you, rather than hope everybody's going to be able to drop everything in the last minute and help sort it out. But I would go through the summary of all the best newsletters, all the best news reports, and all the short forms for the latest business books, and then make decisions on more in-depth reading from there.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've got to be honest as well with the time you have, haven't you? Make the most of that. And as you say, there's some good tips there. So thank you for that. Kate, who mentors the leaders?
I think other leaders, actually. I think there's probably a few things that I'd touch on. So I think networks we've just spoken about quite a lot, I think, already, and that's really, really important. So I think chief executives leaning on other chief executives and having that person at the end of a phone that you can just ring up and say, I've got this challenge, I'm thinking this is probably the best way forward, and just testing it out with someone else, just having someone who's a bit independent who can do that for you. The other thing I've seen work really well, actually, is where people are brought together. There's lots of organisations that bring chief execs together, that bring chairs together, and get people to work through. Or even one member will bring an issue that's facing them and they will talk through together. So I think actually sort of the collective way of doing it is a really powerful tool as well. And especially when you can get ideas from so many different people. And then I wonder if there's something around sort of your non-execs, actually. Is there a role for non-execs here, either with the senior leader of the organisation or perhaps some of the other people in the organisation? What can they bring, and is there a different perspective there that can be tapped into, of sort of people who are already in the organisation but already independent and have a very sort of external view?
And are you aware of that happening, or is it something you would like to see more of?
Yeah, I have seen it happen, but I think it's more where people have asked it to happen rather than anything really structured. And I'm not suggesting that it should be structured, because I think that's quite nice, isn't it? I think, as Debbie was saying, actually sometimes it's about identifying who the right person is to be mentoring you on a specific issue. And I think that's, giving a bit of fluidity around that is probably quite helpful.
Okay. James, can we go back to, I think, something you mentioned at the very beginning about mentoring those for minority groups. I think you spoke about seeing people who are maybe in a similar position or a position you want to be in. I guess for some people in minority groups, the goal is to achieve senior roles, but maybe they don't have the role models in place or they haven't got access to them. How do they get that access? And of course, we know how important the lived in experience is, but in these situations in particular.
Well, I think there's various routes, and of course, in the larger organisations, there's numerous leaders across different departments and different locations. So it may be that someone aspiring to a higher leadership position can seek a mentor from a different part of the organisation. But as we know, a lot of organisations are not as diverse as they could and should be. So then we're starting to look outside the organisation, and then drawing on some of the avenues that Kate just went through around different forums, different networks. If we think, for example, about women in technology, there's a sort of global movement. There's lots of different organizations that sort of hang off that term, but there's this general movement of trying to get more female representation in technology roles. So there's lots of organizations out there that do a lot of active work to try and promote and open up avenues and routes to get more women into technology roles. So there's lots of examples of that. And actually, even today, I had an email from the Race in Business Charter which is where organisations commit to improving the racial diversity in their organisations. And it was, ironically, given the subject of today's topic, it was asking for volunteers, for mentees and for mentors to do that diversity pairing that we spoke about earlier. So there's lots of resources out there if you can't find it in your own organisation.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure people are aware of that. I'm not sure I got the title right. I knew exactly what you're talking about, though. The business in the race. They've got a charter, basically, because I had a similar email as well not so long ago. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Aine, let's go back to the NGDP, because I was just interested in the graduates themselves and the impact perhaps mentoring has on them and why it is so important. What are they saying?
Yeah, I think we get, as I say, really positive feedback from graduates on the programme about the value that they have found from their mentoring relationships. I think one of the things that's really valuable about it is just giving them some space for self-reflection, which I think can be a challenge, particularly when you're at the beginning of your career, to kind of carve out that time and also know how to even go about it. So actually having someone who can give that advice and guidance, and someone senior who can kind of teach you from their experience in the workplace, but also for them to give you the space to ask questions, to kind of put the challenge to step out of your comfort zone. I think that kind of space for self-reflection can be really valuable as well. And I think it's also a good kind of, it's a different relationship for graduates in terms of, it's very different from a managerial relationship. And we really sort of emphasize that they will get out of it what they put into it. So I think for them to really own the relationship, to kind of own their own learning and development, to think about how they can get the most out of their sessions with their mentors, again, just really helps them with their own development. And I think also touching on what some of the other panel have talked about around that experience of people outside of your area. So for example, maybe working in a completely different service area the graduates don't have any experience of, can be really valuable just to give them that organizational perspective, to understand kind of how things work more than their sort of day-to-day experience within their own team. So I think that's really valuable, but I think particularly that opportunity for them to reflect, to kind of take ownership of their own development, I think that's one of the biggest benefits that they find.
And do you find it is a process that repeats itself? So when they are in a position to be mentors, they're more willing to do it?
Definitely. We have a really strong alumni network of people who have gone through the NGDP and are now working either in councils or in kind of other roles in the public sector. And yeah, we find their experience of kind of being on the program and of their own mentoring experience is so helpful, because it means that they're keen to give back, and they want to then work with the graduates on the program to kind of pass on that learning and to kind of encourage them in their careers. So that's really beneficial as well.
Okay, I've just seen the 2-minute sign flash up, so time flies. It certainly has, hasn't it? We've been chatting for half an hour at least, but I just want to end it with the way we started, really. I mean, the title of this discussion is Mentoring for Modernisation, and I just wondered if I could ask each of you what you would like to see happen in order for mentoring to be modernised, and in what way. So just in a couple of sentences. I appreciate it's a big ask, but if you could, that'd be great. Debbie, let's start with you, please, on that one. The best thing that could happen, perhaps, to make it modern mentoring in every sense.
Well, I do think that it is modern. I suppose it's really make sure that, to make it modern, move away from the stereotypes that mentoring is for older people to younger people, basically, and make it understood that it's an inclusive thing, and it can reverse mentoring, as they want to call it. I don't even know why we bothered naming it differently. I suppose it's because we turn around and say, it's always old people mentoring young people, so they call it reverse mentoring to do it the other way. But it should just be mentoring, and it should be something that everybody can understand, no matter what stage you're at. You can potentially benefit from mentoring and mentoring relationships.
Yeah, it is ongoing learning, isn't it, for all generations, I guess.
Everybody.
Yeah. Kate, what about you, please?
Yeah, I was really thinking that it's open to everyone. So a bit of advice that someone gave me was, oh, I wish I'd had a mentor like earlier in my career when I was starting out. And I was like, oh yes, I wish I had as well. So I think it's really opening it up to everyone and thinking, you know, you don't need to be thinking about career aspirations. You can actually just be thinking about, I've got a problem now that I want to share and I want some advice from an expert. So yeah, take it.
Great. James?
Yeah, I'll just build on all those comments. I think the traditional model of mentoring needs to be developed. And I think as well as reverse mentoring, there's lots of opportunity to use. Mentoring is not just for career progression. We can use it for bridging the generation gap, for promoting digital transformation and learning more about digital transformation skills. And of course, making an organisation more diverse and more inclusive.
Brilliant. Anya, final word to you, please.
Thanks. I would definitely echo all of those points. And then just, I guess, to say, to make it as inclusive as possible, I think it needs to be more widespread, more widely available, because if it's up to people to have to kind of put themselves forward to volunteer and ask for a mentor, it's less likely to be inclusive, and the people who could benefit from it the most may not actually have that opportunity. So yeah, I would just say have a lot more of it.
Yeah, increase awareness and accessibility, isn't it, from what you're saying? We are almost out of time. So panel, want to thank you all for being with us this afternoon. Anya, James, Debbie and Kate, really good to hear from you, and a real pleasure to talk to you all this afternoon. Thank you very much, and enjoy
Thanks,
the rest
everyone.
of your day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you to all our panelists. I hope you enjoyed that discussion. And the good news is we have another discussion before the end of play today. So hopefully you can join us for that. We have certainly covered a lot so far, but we are going to take a break. It is our final break of the day, and therefore your last chance to engage with all the platform has to offer, whether this is our digital marketplace or indeed our networking capabilities. Take the opportunities, please enjoy them, and make the most of the session that is available. We will see you back here at 3:10. But for now, enjoy the break.